Welcome to Picks with the Professor, the podcast where a real statistics professor
and his cousin Jared.
And the pop to their snap and crackle, Jake.
Nice. I like that one. Gives you sports betting tips. I am Professor Side. You can follow me and find all my picks on Twitter at Professor Side. You can follow my cousin Jared on Twitter at Cousin Jared. And you can follow my friend Jake on Twitter at myfriend_Jake. Today is Friday, March 11th, 2022. And this episode covers today's best college basketball bets. In case you're new here, I built a mathematical model that predicts what the spread and total should be for every Division I college basketball game. That information, along with a graded A, B, or C pick for each of today's games not covered in this episode, is available in the Google Sheet linked in the show's description. A picks are the ones I love, B picks are the ones I like, and C picks are the leans. However, please remember that good and bad variance will occur. So as much as I'd like to say the model will be profitable each and every day, that is an impossible reality for any gambler. Yesterday, the model had a good day on this here podcast. I went 6-1. USC let us down, had them -5. They won by 4. Otherwise, cleaned the slate. So that was a lot of fun, at least for me personally. Jake, what is one thing we need to know?
So the big thing that happened last night, basketball-wise, was Arizona lost to Krisa during the middle of the game, or Krisa, however you say his name, and it didn't look great. He says it's questionable for tonight, but it did not look like anything fun. I wouldn't expect him tonight, and it'd be something to keep your eye on. One, he's a very important player, and two, how does Tommy Lloyd handle this? Does he, back off to kind of prevent another injury because they're safely in and probably safely a 1 seed, or does he still go for the Pac-12 title? It's kind of, since he's a first-year coach, it's really hard to judge how important that tournament title is to him since he got the regular season one. And then secondly, this is just kind of a programming type deal. We're creating a ESPN bracket group for all the bracket things. Like when those come out, the group's already created. The password to it is all lowercase professor. The name is the name of the show, Picks with the Professor. Feel free to join, see if you can beat us. We're just picking winners, so maybe you can beat us, maybe you can't.
All right. And then a reminder about the schedule for the week. Live episode tomorrow. We'll go back with the live shows. Tomorrow, that'll be 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central. Join. If you're a subscriber, you can hop on that chat and ask us questions. We'll answer questions about any game that we have time for. We'll probably go a little bit longer. 30-ish games tomorrow. So lots of fun ones tomorrow. And then we'll do a recorded Sunday episode. We're still making that push for 1,000 YouTube subscribers. Had a lot yesterday, so really appreciate all of you that did. If you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button. We love it when you do that. Thank you so much. If we can get to that 1,000, we will break down every single tournament game as bonus content. So Jake and I will we'll just not sleep for the whole week. We'll just be constantly putting out content for you guys. We won't make it that long.
Yeah, guys, y'all start hydrating now for that.
Yeah, exactly. Thankfully, after the first 2 days, it gets a little bit easier, right? It's kind of like a downhill thing. It's those first 2 days that are going to be kind of crazy. Today, we've got an afternoon game to start us off with. 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 Central. St. Louis and St. Bonaventure. The model thinks that St. Louis should be a 2.5-point favorite, so I've got a B pick on St. Louis -1. We have faded the Bonnies on this here podcast, I swear, once a week, maybe twice a week. They have underperformed my numbers. So I look into that. I keep metrics on that to kind of see, like, am I always playing a team, always fading a team, always taking it over or an under, and I'm missing in that regard. We fade the Bonnies a lot, but they have underperformed my numbers. So I don't think that it's been bad to fade them. It's gone 9-9 though, so it hasn't really been overly profitable. The reason I like this pick is that the model is 13-5 backing St. Louis. So this is less a play about fading the Bonnies, which again, we always seem to do, and more about, I like St. Louis. They've been good to us. They've overperformed my model by 2 points per game. So I thought they should do well. They've done better than I thought they should do. I don't see any reason why that changes here. The number is great at -1. You don't have to have them, hardly win by anything. In worst case scenario, they win and you push, right? So I think the number is fantastic at -1. I think they're a better team than St. Bonaventure. Jake, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm with you. I like the St. Louis team. I know they've lost twice, and it was back-to-back games to St. Bonaventure. Mm-hmm. But I think they get it done this time. It's really hard to beat a team 3 times in a row, as we've seen in several cases in other conference tournaments. But all the metrics, like every metric, St. Louis is just a little bit better than St. Bonaventure, every one of them, except for turnovers. In both matchups, St. Louis had 10 more turnovers than St. Bonaventure at least. And so as long as they solve that and bring it down to, I don't know, 7 or 8 more instead of 10, they kill a few extra possessions and they win the game, because both losses were single digits. So you don't know when those turnovers happen and what that changes in a game, like momentum, or like what kind of point swing it was, if it's a 5-point swing because St. Bonaventure hits a 3. So I really think once they get that solved, and that's something the coach is going to be preaching, because I'm sure that's making him pull his hair out, is just going. I think they get it done. I think they fix that. They're not going to all of a sudden not turn the ball over at all, because it was 17 and 18 turnovers in both those games. But I think they bring that down closer to the 15 or 10 mark, and that gives them the extra possessions to win the game.
And what you said makes a lot of sense there too. Something to keep in mind with these conference tournaments. Today is the last day that you have starting the tournament, so you've had the whole week to prep. Now, there are a couple of exceptions with that, with some of the weird games tomorrow where they've had off days where you've had time to prep. So a couple of those to keep in mind. But most of the games after today are you just played yesterday, so you may not have as much time to correct the issues, right, like that. But on this one, you did specifically, and the whole, it's tough to beat a team 3 times. Again, a lot of that is because you have time to prep and adjust. They've had that time here because this is the first matchup of their tournament, as opposed to if you have a rematch and later in the tournament, it's still hard to beat them 3 times, but it's a little bit harder to implement those game changes. So like you said, a good point there that the turnovers are the problem, but they've had all week to kind of figure out, here's how the Bonnies are going to pressure you into those turnovers. Here's how we try to limit those, how to prevent a couple of them. And that could be the difference in that one. Jared, what do you have for us?
So I'm on the under 139 here. The model has had 13 plays on St. Louis overs this year, but only 5 plays on St. Louis unders. So that definitely caught my eye. It has been profitable on those 5 unders this year. So I'm just going to go with the model seeing something here that I don't see, and I feel good about the under 139.
All right, we've got a couple of Big East games that are going to be really interesting here. 5:30 Central, Creighton versus Providence. Providence is a short 3-point favorite with a total of 131 and a half. Creighton continues to surprise me. They had a nice win yesterday. Kind of tried to blow it there late, but for the most part, seemed to handle that game pretty well and handle what Marquette threw at them. Creighton has overperformed my numbers, but Providence has overperformed them by even more. And so in that situation, I don't think there's any negative Creighton bias, or if so, I have a negative Providence bias that's even larger. So the math says take Providence. The math says it should be a 4.5-point spread, not 3. So I'm laying the 3. I like the number at 3 as well. There's a lot of ways we could win that. As the number gets higher, you have to start worrying about fouls and situations like that. So if the number is a little bit higher, I'm much more nervous about this. But at 3, I think this is a solid place. I have a B pick on Providence -3 in the first Big East semifinal. Jake, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm with you with Providence. They've just pulled magic out of a hat almost every time. So the small numbers are good for them, because the bigger the numbers they have trouble with, because they let teams hang around, but they always seem to pull it out in the end. I know they beat this Creighton team at home by 21 in the only matchup of the year. And so I think it's just a bad matchup for Creighton. I think Creighton's run comes to an end, especially with Nembhard being out. That's their most dynamic, create his own shot guard. And without him, it really puts a kink in their offense. And Providence has a really good matchup for their big guys with Nate Watson and Mania. They're athletic enough to guard them around the perimeter, and they're big enough to handle them in the paint. And Providence is a pretty good defensive team, but really guards the 3-point arc very well, holding teams to 30.9 on the year, and in their last 3 it's at 23.6. So without the 3 ball and no real guards that'll create, I think AJ Reeves and Al Durham will just and Jared Bynum will just kind of take over the game towards the end, and because I think it'll be a tight game, probably under 10, but I think at the end those 3 guys will take over and be able to score when Creighton can't.
All right, Cousin Jared.
So I'm kind of going to marry what the two of you just said. I think Providence is definitely the better team here, but I've seen enough interesting late game situations from Providence where I don't feel great laying the point. So I'm actually going to take a money line play on Providence here.
Ooh, okay.
Widely available at -160. I trust them to win the game, but man, just some of those close games that they've played this year and barely covering, in the tournament, I just don't know if I trust them to cover that, even at that short number. So I'm going to take money line -160.
That's an interesting angle there, and especially because as Jake was talking, I was thinking to myself, it's like, laying 3 with Providence is they're probably going to win by 2, right? Like, and again, the model says 4.5. I'll lay the 3, right? But like Providence winning by 2, everyone would just be like, yeah, that seems about right,
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you went with that angle. And while we're here, I think it is important to note, because there's a lot of chatter on Twitter about money lines and what's good value and not value or whatever. And so I think the thing to keep in mind with money lines is that the reason people tend to say don't lay things greater than -110 is that it becomes, it's not about if it's smart or not, because the answer to the question of is it a smart play is convert that money line to probability. So for the minus odds, the way you do that is take that number and then divide it by that number plus 100. So Jared, you said -160?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the way we convert that to probability is 160 divided by 160 plus 100, which is 260. So 160 divided by 260, I don't know what that is off the top of my head. That's a percentage. If you think they win more than that percentage of the time, that's a valuable play. The issue that people have with money lines is their brains want to be like, oh, sure, they'll win. And it's not that simple, right? And so if you have a hard time understanding that, I would just say money lines can be dangerous, but that doesn't mean they aren't good investments. And the sharpest players, the pros, they absolutely take money lines when there is value. And so it's just, you have to understand, is it a situation where the probabilities work out? So that's why people like me have built models. There's probability calculators out there you can find. So it's just something to think about there with the money line plays.
Yeah, and just let the record show, I took none of that into consideration when I decided to play a money line here. It just makes my heart rate go down a little bit if Providence wins by 2. So that was my reasoning behind it.
Totally fair. Without further ado, let's get into the other Big East semifinal game, Connecticut versus Villanova. Villanova winning a fantastic game last night against St. John's. The spread here is Villanova -3, total 131.5. I'm taking over 131.5. The model thinks it should be closer to 133.5. I got Nova under yesterday. But remember, we're not just playing teams, we're playing numbers and teams. And you hear the whole, like, you're playing numbers, not teams. I think that's a little bit foolish. You are playing the number and the team, right? It's both. And the idea here is, in my opinion, that we talked about Nova and St. John's yesterday. St. John's wants to speed that game up. Villanova knew that and wanted to slow them down. UConn doesn't want to speed the game up. They don't necessarily play super fast. They don't play overly slow, but they don't play fast by any stretch of the imagination. They're not going to try to speed up. So I don't think Villanova is going in there saying our game plan is to slow the game down. I think Villanova's just going to go out there and play their normal game. Both offenses are incredibly efficient. And so I think over makes a lot of sense. I'm 7-4 on UConn over edges, 10-7 on Villanova over edges. And I'm just going to trust that Nova's whole game plan entering tonight is not going to be how do we slow this team down, because I don't think that makes a lot of sense against UConn. So I think that's going to allow us to get over that number of 131.5. Jake, can Villanova win and do it by more than 3?
Yeah, I think they do. I think these teams are built very, very similarly, with a really good guard leading the way with RJ Cole and Colin Gillespie. That battle will be incredible to watching those two guys go at it. I think this matchup leans more Villanova just because, one, Colin Gillespie has a little more to his game than RJ Cole because of size. He's got more size, and he likes to back smaller guards in. And so I don't know who matches up with him because on Connecticut's team, because if you take RJ Cole off of him, they've got the same problem, and it's worse size advantage as you go farther down the list because he's on the smaller end. But the real key to this game is Sabongo and Dixon. Whoever outscores the other one is who wins the game, and that's what happened in the previous 2 games. When Dixon outscored Sabongo, the Villanova won fairly easily, and the same thing happened with UConn when Sabongo won or outscored Dixon. So it's really key to see how those 2 guys are going, because both teams don't really have a replacement for that player. Both teams have a thin bench. It's really key to see who's out rebounding who, because that's where these guys get both their shots. And one of the big factors leaning Villanova here is Dixon can step out and shoot that 3 where Sabongo can't, and so that might pull him away from the bucket enough to open up things where on the other end it's not as open for RJ Cole and the other guards for Connecticut. So I'm not super confident in this, so I'm leaning Villanova, but I still like him to do it.
All right, Jared.
So I haven't cleared this with my bosses here on the podcast, so I don't know if what I'm about to do is legal. But everything seems spot on to me with this game. So my recommendation is sit this one out, guys.
All right.
Take in the sights and sounds of Madison Square Garden during the Big East tournament. It is a great atmosphere, and I think one thing we can say is nothing crazy ever happens with UConn in the Big East tournament, right?
Yeah.
There's no way that we would have a 6 overtime game or something like that. So hopefully this just turns out to be a great game. But from my perspective, I say nothing of value here. Just enjoy what's hopefully going to be a really good game.
All righty. And then there are some interesting late games. Rather than talk about USC, UCLA, we're going to talk about the other late game, the late game you should watch, the midnight special, midnight Eastern time.
Wow.
San Diego State versus Colorado State out in the desert. It's a pick'em. The total is 124.5. I'm taking over 124.5. The model thinks it should be 126. I don't really have anything fantastic to say. I'm going to turn it over to Jake, and then I'm going to hope Cousin Jared has some good nuggets as to why we should play the over, because I'm really just kind of trusting the math and saying, hey, if you're staying up late, you might as well root for points, because if you're not, you're going to fall asleep, right? That's really all I can say about it. Jake, who wins between San Diego State and Colorado State?
This game is like the unstoppable force versus immovable object, right? The San Diego State's defense and Colorado State's offense. It's going to be a fun one. They split them, and don't read too much into the numbers of the split, because Colorado State had the worst game of their life and lost by 30 to San Diego State early in the year. And then the last game was a 1-point game. It'll be much closer to that 1-point game, because Colorado State scored, I think, 40% of their points from the free throw line in the first game. They weren't making any shots. So it really comes down to turnovers. Can San Diego State force Colorado State to turn the ball over? Because Colorado State is in the top 5 and not turning the ball over, and San Diego State is forcing around 15 turnovers a game. So which one of those kind of wins that battle? I lean Colorado State here. I actually like it more than I like UConn, because I don't think San Diego State has enough offense to really push them over the edge here in like a tournament style game. The defenses are great, but you still got to be able to score. They've got Matt Bradley, who's scoring, is an incredible player, and he's scoring 15, 16, 17 a game, and it's up higher towards the end of the year. But after that, they have nobody else sniffing double digits. And I think Roddy is such a matchup problem that he really causes issues and opens up 3 balls for Colorado State. And I think a few more of those go in than normal, and they win this one by less than 5, probably around 3. But that's where I think this game lands.
All right, Cousin Jared.
I promise, guys, we didn't plan this, but again, I'm going to kind of take what both of you guys said here. So you mentioned the unstoppable force versus immovable object. Well, actually, that's what's making the determination for me in this game, because this time of year, I trust teams that can get stops, and I'm not sure there's any team that I trust more to get a stop when they need it than San Diego State. So I'm actually on San Diego State here. And Professor, to your point about this game going over, I know San Diego State, obviously, great defense and everything, but since February 1st, they've had games where they've scored 72, 76, 75, 77, 73, 79. I can definitely see this being one of those games, obviously, because of the offense that Colorado State has. But again, for me, this is just a play of, when it comes down to it, I trust San Diego State to get some stops. And so I think the pick here is a great spot for them.
All righty. And then that takes us to our solo Jake segment. I gave it another silly name yesterday, and thus we won. So again, the one blip in the radar this week, again, that's on me. I take responsibility for that. I've got another one for you today. Yesterday, we took some points with TCU, and that was taking the Jake. Today, we're going to lay some points. So this is laying with Jake. Oklahoma is playing Texas Tech. Texas Tech is a 7-point favorite. Why should we lay the points here today with Texas Tech?
A fully healthy Texas Tech team is nasty. But their defense is just nuts and insanely good. They just really, really great team. With Kevin McCullough coming back and him playing significant minutes last night, really showed up how great that offense is when it gets going. And so now that they've got him back, and they're probably going on a little more with that, and getting him used to it, and Adamas Arms and Shannon all coming through, it's going to be I think it's going to be much closer to that 20-point win that they had against Oklahoma than that 15-point loss that they had in that aberration of a game. It's real, like, the only chance Oklahoma has is they don't have enough offense with Groves and Gibson. They really got to force a lot of turnovers, and that's just not their style. And the fact that the third leading scorer is Jordan Goldwire, like, watching him at Duke over the last 4 years has been absolutely terrible. Because on the offensive end, he's a great defensive player, but man, watching him on the offensive end he just struggles like crazy. So I don't think they've got enough to keep this one close.
All righty, and then that takes us to our overtime A plays of the day. I've got 6 of them for you. We're going to have a couple of them early in the day. I'm going to start off 10:30 a.m. Central Time. Indiana, I'm taking them +5 versus Illinois. Indiana won a tight win yesterday. We know that they know how to lose close. So +5 makes a lot of sense here because they can lose by 3, they can lose by 4. We're all winners, right? So IU +5 versus Illinois, I think makes a lot of sense. I am 6-3 backing the Hoosiers. I think that's the side you want to be on there this morning. At 1 p.m. Central, LSU +2 versus Arkansas. LSU lost by 1 in Little Rock last time. I think the wrong team is favored here. At minimum, this should be a pick 'em. So getting +2 or money line, I think, makes a lot of sense there in a toss-up game where I might lean a little bit LSU, but at minimum, it's a coin toss. 2 p.m. Central, UAB -5 versus Middle Tennessee State. We've done well backing Middle Tennessee, but this line should be a lot higher. If Jefferson is out again, which it seems like he is, then even though I make the number 7.5, it's probably higher than that. So my number's making it 7.5. If he plays, it probably should be more like 6.5. If he doesn't, it probably should be more like 8.5. My number right now is kind of pegging it more in the middle. I think anything less than 7 is a great play here. So I like UAB to cover the 5. At 5 p.m. Central, I've got Texas A&M Corpus Christi +5.5 versus Nicholls State. These Southland games are wild. Way too many points here in this one, and anything can happen in that one. 9 p.m. Central, I'm going Portland State +5. They've been really good to us lately against Northern Colorado. 8-4 backing Portland State and 7-4 fading Northern Colorado, so I'm taking those 5 points with Portland State. I think they got a chance to win outright. They've been coming along really strong the last 2 months. And then the A-plus play of the day, 22-14-1 all-time here. I'm taking 11 a.m. Central morning tip here. I'm giving you Fordham +11 versus Davidson. I'm 7-2 backing Fordham. I've backed Davidson a lot this year. I like Davidson. This is just too many points. Davidson wins this game. They'll be up 9. There'll be 20 seconds to go. No need to foul. Davidson wins by 9. We get to the window with Fordham +11.
Yeah, it breaks my heart to go against MTSU here because they've been great to me all year. But with them losing Jefferson, it's a rough go. And UAB is really good, and they've got a great coach in Andy Kennedy. I think they get this done very easily.
Jared, anything to add?
Nothing to add here. That Fordham line I noticed was even money as well on the +11, so gotta love that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that takes us to our buzzer beaters. I've got 2 more for you. Got them both on Wednesday, got them both on Thursday. Let's see if I can get them both on Friday here. The best B-side, 5 p.m. Central. I've got some action. All the A's in there, right? Monmouth -4.5 versus Rider. We're 9-4 backing Monmouth. 6-4 fading Rider. I like the number at 4.5. I think that's got some value there at 4.5, maybe 5 is about the highest I'd go on there, but got some good value there on that number. So I think they win by 6 or 7. And then the afternoon delight here, we took Iowa over yesterday in the afternoon. Today, I'm switching it up. I'm not taking the over. I'm laying the points with Iowa -6.5. Rutgers has overperformed my numbers by about a point per game, but Iowa by 4 points per game, which is an insanely high number. Most teams are in the 1 or 2 range. But Iowa has been fantastic. If the math says to back Iowa and the math's even underestimated just how good Iowa is, I think there's a lot to like with this here. 6-3 backing Iowa, 10-6 fading Rutgers. So Iowa by 6.5 offers a lot of value in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that Iowa pick. Interesting note, Keegan Murray, who's averaging almost 24 points a game, is hitting 55% of his shots, which is just nuts when you consider that he is playing from all over the floor. So if he keeps that up, that's just an insane number. But so my buzzer beaters, I'm just going to surprise everybody and go with Tennessee here and take them -6.5 against Mississippi State. They just don't have enough offense to keep up with how this Tennessee team is playing and how they're shooting the ball right now. Tennessee's got a great defense. I think they run away with this one towards the end of the second half. And then hurts my heart to do this. I'm going with North Carolina. Just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. But the -2 against a Virginia Tech team that I don't trust at all. I think North Carolina has really hit their stride here, figured out how to play, and I think they're going to cover this one fairly easy.
All right, Cousin Jared.
So I want to start this off with an honorable mention here. LSU Arkansas under 139. This is one of those where I can't quite get there right now. If the line moves up, I'm probably going to take the under there. But this is one of those, like a couple of weeks ago, I said I might talk myself into something. I talked myself into it like 10 minutes after the podcast was over. So this might be the same situation here. So just watch that LSU Arkansas total. If that goes up, I'm definitely on the under there. So other buzzer beaters, Colorado and Arizona under 148. We've talked all year about how Arizona can score, but we've also mentioned their defense is really good. So I like the under 148 there. Morgan State, Norfolk State, over 140. Don't ask, just trust me on this one. And then Cincinnati and Houston under 133.5. Luke Fickell has a great defense there in Cincinnati, and Dana Holgorsen, the pace is really slow. Oh wait, no, sorry, I'm getting hung up on my Houston unders from the college football podcast. But most of that same stuff applies. Cincinnati likes to play low-scoring games. Houston with the short bench, if they get out by a lot, they don't have any incentive to run up the score. So the under 133.5 in that Cincinnati-Houston game looks good to me.
All righty, and that's all we've got for you today. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Picks with the Professor. Reminder, check out that Google Sheet for picks on all of today's games not covered in this show. If you haven't done so yet, click that subscribe button to ensure all the college basketball content is dropped right into your feed. And hey, baseball's back, so we'll have some baseball content for you come April 7th. So we'll finish college basketball, we'll go right into some baseball content. So we're looking forward to that. We will see you tomorrow for that live show, 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central. Be a subscriber, and you can join that chat and ask us questions about any of the games. Until then, remember, you can eat your betting money, but please don't bet your eating money.